just want to ask a quick question here, kind of take a little, I'm sorry, I didn't think about this far enough in advance to do an actual poll for this. But if you are at your institution coming out of a tradition or a department or an area that you would call tech, IT, something like that, let me see a show of hands for that. People who consider themselves kind of in the technical world. Okay. And then if you are coming from more of a faculty affairs perspective, let me see a show of hands for that. Okay, fabulous, great. Put your hands down. Let's go back to the folks who call themselves, think of themselves, identify whatever we want to call it as IT or technical folks. If you are a technical person, raise your hand again. And I want you to put your other hand up if you have had training in technical subjects, IT, data governance, any of those kinds of topics. Put your second hand up. Okay, so we've got a couple people like that. All right, fabulous. Y'all put your hands down. For our faculty affairs folks, I want you to go ahead and put your hand back up if you are faculty affairs. All right. And now I want you to tell me if you have a formal background, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD in faculty affairs. How many people do I have? We've got 1.5. My point is, most of faculty affairs, we are coming at this from a fabulous place of organic knowledge. And what I mean by that is we have learned by doing. And that's wonderful. We are very well steeped in our traditions, in skills and expertise that we've built over the course of our careers. But it also means that we have some gaps sometimes in our knowledge. So there are times when some of our tech folks might listen to some of the things that I'm saying and say, oh my God, Maggie, that is the most obvious thing that I've ever heard of. Of course, we're going to look at data governance. Of course, we're going to look at some of these other things that I'm talking about here. But for our faculty affairs folks in the room, for some of us, these kinds of things are revelations. And that's why we're talking about them, and that's why we're sharing them here today. All right. So, Corey, if we can go to our first slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about the University of Rochester and where we are at, how we got to where we are with Interfolio. And our starting place was when we got a new president in 2019, Sarah Mangelsdorf looked around the institution and she had a couple of revelations very early in her presidency. Where she realized that even though we are a university with 7 separate schools, we were not acting like one university. The story she tells us, she went to a concert at Tanglewood, and she was flipping through the program there, and all the music schools around the United States had advertisements in this particular program for Tanglewood, and the Eastman School of Music was represented there. And nowhere on that page for the Eastman School of Music did it say the University of Rochester, even though they are one of our schools. So we went into our new presidency with her saying, we're one university and we need to act like one. So what does that mean? One university is really not just a philosophy. I mean, we're looking at this, our outlook really should be that we are one central university, and that allows us to capitalize on some opportunities. But for all of us who work at the university, particularly for those of us who work in central administration like I do, we need to always be considering that context. You know, it should be an expectation in the way that we work that we are going to take one university approach, and we're going to approach processes with an investment outlook that's going to say, let's look at this as a way to really be effective and really be efficient, because that's the bonus of having one university, right? That's why we have this conglomeration of schools together. So let that be the foundation for all of the work that we do. So our central administration really thinks that this is what our university looks like. We've got the University of Rochester at the top. We divide that into the academic center and the medical center. Our medical center is huge compared to our academic center. We have a modest-sized academic enterprise and a quite large medical center with nursing and a med school over there. And then our academic center is arts and sciences, engineering, music, business, and education, which is all fabulous. So this is what the central administration really thinks our university looks like. You want to know what our schools think that our university looks like? This. Okay. Right, we got everybody headed in a different direction. Everybody's doing their own thing. And then we have this wonderful lurker in the front that's staring and watching everyone. And that's what they think central administration is. So we really had a bit of a hurdle to overcome when we wanted to get to this one university process. The first thing that we did was we set up a data governance process. And I have to say, give a shout out to Dr. San Cannon, was our data governance officer at that point in our history. And she really said, if we're going to take a one university approach, this kind of enterprise view, we have to have data governance principles that work. My slides all the slides are in the app. You should be able to follow that link and click on it, and you'll get the full readout of data governance principles. If you're someone in faculty affairs for whom data governance is kind of a new concept, please go ahead and take a look at that. It might actually be fairly useful to you. Because we talk about data sharing, we talk about standards. We talk about, the ways that we should operate with data and what that actually looks like. So standard definitions, naming conventions, and metadata specifications are a huge part of the way we set up Interfolio for success at our institution. We started this with what we called the Academic Job Codes Project, and this was about 2 to 3 years before we ever purchased Interfolio at our institution. Every single school had a different way of setting up faculty appointments. They had these kind of HR job codes that they used, numbers that they associated with particular faculty ranks and expectations and work and all of this kind of stuff, but they were completely different across the different schools. So if you said professor of practice, that meant one thing at one of our schools and meant something completely different at a different school. If you said a clinical professor or a research professor or an instructional track professor, all of those had different meanings at different places in the institution. So our Office of Institutional Research was pulling their hair out every time they were asked to do a report, and they were trying to compare apples to apples and had these huge pages and pages and pages long lists of how do we compare, who do we put in our IPEDS report for this particular group? Well, it depends, right? So my friend, Dr. Cannon, said her two least favorite responses to any question were, it depends and it's complicated. And so we decided to make the dependencies go away, make the complication go away, and have one model for our academic job codes. And that means that we sat down with all of our stakeholders from each of the schools, and we said, what are the responsibilities of a position? This is not about people. This is about the position. And the minute we took away the people aspect of those job codes, it wasn't about a single person. It was about the responsibilities of a position. That took away some of the personalization of the problem, of the complexity. So we focused on the positions. We created a matrix of unique identifiers, And so regardless of what title they have, we would be able to compare what the responsibilities of the position were. And that allows us to do reporting across the institution, okay? We still let them have functional titles. That was one of those, you know, when you talk about negotiation and the psychology of getting people to come along, that was the win for the schools, was that we did not crack down on functional titles. One of my friends used to say that she could have a title that said Empress of the Universe as long as she could get her boss to sign off on it, because the functional titles are still up to them. But the underlying job code, which is what we use for all of our governance documents, are really tied to the position, okay? So how did this help us with our pathway to success? The mandate from the president was huge, and that was all woven through our strategic plan. Really having strong data governance at this point in our institution was also a big piece of that. For those of you who have data governance offices, if you're in faculty affairs, trust me, those folks know how to do this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Those are folks that you should be working with, talking to, taking out to coffee, all of that kind of stuff. Stakeholders, buy-in from school leadership. You're going to hear a lot more from my colleagues at SMU about the leadership and getting the buy-in from faculty. Outcomes, we really got a lot of early wins, and that's critical. For those of you who have not done a lot of work in how to actually go about the process of change management, a great basic text, Leading Change by John Cotter, it's been out for 25, 30 years, something like that, walks you through the basics of how to actually get early meaningful wins, finding those champions, all of the actual steps that you need to take in order to do a process of change management and do it well. You might also have a change management office either in IT or someplace else in your institution. Rely on them. They know how to get it done at your place. And so that gave us momentum for the next round of changes. And for us, the next round of changes was actually implementing Interfolio. And I'll talk about that in some examples as we go on. We also, at the same time, implemented a new Workday human capital management system. So we are a Workday and Interfolio shop. We have the integrations, and we're happy to talk about that, either myself or a shout out to my two fabulous colleagues over here, Amanda and Jesse. If you please will raise your hands. They can also answer questions about what that process is like. So I'll stop there, but that's basically where we're coming from.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Maggie. So now we're going to kick it over to Southern Methodist University and Mandy and Molly for a little bit of an overview of where they were, where they are, and where they're going.
Great. Thanks so much, Corey. My name is Mandy Graham. I'm a senior faculty affairs professional in the Office of Faculty Success at Southern Methodist University. We are a R1 private institution in Dallas, Texas. We have about 12,500 students across our undergraduate, graduate, and professional programs. Our breakdown is about 7,500 undergrads and 5,000 graduate students. We have 8 degree granting schools and a faculty, full-time faculty of a little over 800. I think it's 809 right now. Of course, on top of that, as you all know, we have lots of adjuncts and things like that too that are not included in that count. The way that we came into existence with Interfolio has a faculty governance and systems context. We are, and still continue to be, but we're working very closely, very hard to get out of there, but we are a very decentralized campus. We have decentralized academic units that they all have a strong faculty government structure, but we're trying to make it into a single one. Faculty activity reporting, review processes, searches, all of that was coming in a lot of different programs. And I'll talk more about that when we get to my section at the end, but it's very manual, not only for our faculty and search committees and things like that, but especially for our administrative professionals, our support staff that were really doing a lot of that work behind the scenes. And it became an institutional priority to modernize our faculty systems and improve the transparency across all stakeholders at all levels within our university. We adopted Interfolio at different levels all the way around. So our phase one was adopted, first. We had a couple of schools that started using our faculty search. Again, we're very decentralized. So they started using it without public provost buy-in, faculty, affairs buy-in. And in 2020, we made it a mandate that all faculty searches were going to be using Interfolio. Prior to that, we were using all different systems across all schools. RPT was second. That came, and we initially adopted it earlier, and in 2017, that became the single and required platform for all promotions. Again, that was something that the schools took on themselves, not a university-wide centralized program. And FAR is our most recent addition, so we do have Faculty Success, RPT, and FAR. FAR we just adopted. We've just finished our first year of implementation and rollout, and it was fun. So, and here's Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly Ellis. I'm the Assistant Provost for Faculty Success at SMU. I get to work closely with Mandy and then also our Associate Provost, Paige Ware. I love that we're presenting with Maggie Graham from Syracuse, because as you can hear, our institutions, we are approaching this very differently. They are one university under a mandate to start centralizing processes and improving their governance. And we're coming at this, what our previous slide was a little generous. We called it a phased approach, but as Mandy articulated, it was kind of an ad hoc. People started adopting it, some of our schools started adopting it, and now we're trying to centralize some of those uses for it. And I'll say we're still being very successful. It's just two different ways to approach this. Although I am a little jealous that you have a mandate to help dictate how schools can start doing it. But we're working more with carrots and sticks. So that's how you'll with our faculty and with our leaders. So you'll kind of hear a little bit more about that as we get into our presentation further. But so what I wanted to discuss is, as we've adopted each one of our Interfolio products, I want to talk about why we did it. And when I was reviewing this slide this morning, I laughed a little bit. I wanted to email Corey and be like, this looks like we're trying to sell Interfolio products with how this goes. Because it does kind of articulate the need that they provide. But what I want to share honestly is that we had issues on our campus that then these products helped us address. So that's why we're going to kind of go over where we got with those. So with faculty search, as Mandy stated, we didn't have standardized processes across our various schools, across our 8 different schools with how those were working. They eventually rolled up to what was needing more central approval. But what faculty search within Interfolio allowed us to do was to standardize those processes across our schools, to improve our tracking, where we can be reporting and understanding it almost to real time for us, for being able to report when someone asks how many people do we have in the pipeline, where are we, we're able to do that a little differently. And then have those committee workflows where we weren't going, we need to create a box system to help, or Dropbox, or whatever your institution may be on, to help share information. We could use this within a system. And then, of course, as you can imagine, being decentralized like that, we were having a lot of compliance headaches. We were able to pull all of our information together successfully. It just was a lot more manual labor. So that's where search helped us. And then with review, promotion, and tenure, I always hold out a binder. So those that have done the tenure work, you picture that big old binder that a faculty member sets down and goes, this is my career. We still have those in a lot of our schools, where people are still doing paper-based products. I'm looking at someone laughing. I see her laughing because I know this resonates with some of you all, with how that looks with those binders. But what review, promotion, and tenure is allowing us to do is move that to a digital process. I mean, if you're on the save the trees mindset, that's great too. But it's also the actual labor and work of putting something together that way. So RPT has helped us replace that paper-based tenure process. It's improved our transparency and access of our review committees, and then it's helped us create consistent institutional workflows. So what I emphasize with faculty search and RPT is that they were adopted decentralized, and we're trying to centralize them. So you'll hear as we get into a little more Q&A that we're working on making those more streamlined. One of the things we're proud of that we learned in our phase 1 and phase 2, when we adopted FAR in our third phase with Interfolio, is that we couldn't adopt it that way. We learned our lessons. We needed to come from a more strategic, centralized approach if we were going to be asking faculty to adopt a system. So when we brought on FAR, we brought it on because we brought it on, one, in full transparency, an expiring contract with another vendor, and we needed another solution. And already having success with 2 Interfolio products, it made sense. But we couldn't lose that opportunity to still have our centralized faculty activity reporting. And then we wanted to reduce our duplicate reporting across systems, and then we wanted to improve access and reporting going forward. So what's helped us huge is leadership buy-in and faculty buy-in when how we're doing this. So I'm going to speak a lot, as Mandy mentioned, we just finished our FAR implementation, so you'll hear me talk a lot about that in this space. So big one was faculty governance engagement. We involved in our faculty activity reporting implementation, we involved leadership from each one of our decentralized schools in the conversations. I'm looking at Corey because he was our implementation manager at the time, from the very first conversation. So we were not the administration, as Maggie showed, looming over. We were not trying to be the administration looming over saying this is a system coming. We invited stakeholders, leaders from each school to come into that conversation with us from the beginning. So then we also have clear institutional ownership. So when you implement a new system on campus, you're setting up your system administrator, we partnered with our Office of Institutional Technology, IR, to help with data. But we, as Office of Faculty Success, we own our Interfolio portfolio. So that has helped us be able to have us to maintain clear ownership, as when a faculty member has a question, they go to who they're used to going to. They're going to their Faculty Success office. And then incremental implementation, this was a little bit by accident. We didn't adopt the whole suite from Interfolio at once. We did it in our accidental phase process, but we found that successful. We didn't tell faculty, we're moving to 3 new systems. We did 1 at a time with how we did it. We found that successful in that space. And then we focused on the faculty experience. We did focus groups, we did roadshows. We learned, for those that were in sessions yesterday with Palo Alto and some of our other colleagues that talked about their FAR implementation, you learn that one communication isn't it. It takes multiple iterative communications, and so we focused on the faculty experience and how we set that up and making sure we were communicating to them continuously, and created training and documentation to support everything that was going through. Oh, perfect. So what we're still working on is implementation. As we all learn in our change management spaces, is not a one-time event. It becomes an ongoing operational system that requires a lot of refinement. So we're still working on our reporting culture, helping faculty and leaders understand that this is to support your work, not a requirement for you to do your work. We're working on our data quality and our integrations. Was really happy to see the things in the roadmap. We've got blinking slides. The things in the roadmap that were announced by product development for Interfolio yesterday were really helpful in some of our data integrations we're going to see to help reduce some of the manual work we ask of our faculty to do. Again, we can't overnight fix our workflow differences across schools, so that's going to be iterative, and we're still working on that. And then training and turnover, which I hope Mandy will talk about a little bit later, that we're continuing to educate our faculty, our chairs, our school leaders, as well as our administrative professional staff, because they end up with a lot of this on their plate within our schools, and so we've designed training specifically for them, and then working on maintaining clear documentation in our support structures. So I think with that, it goes back to you for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go into just kind of some facilitated discussion as a panel up here. So kind of focusing on some key themes. So we kind of got a great overview of Rochester and SMU and how they've done things, but we're just going to kind of have them talk a little bit more in depth about some of their experiences. So Maggie, we're going to kind of start with you with kind of that theme of change management and strategy. So what I really liked about Rochester's story is that, you know, as many of you know, the work starts even before implementation. You have to have that like intentional strategic plan and objective. So can you tell us a little bit more about the opportunity that you all had when it comes to some of those past practices or assumptions, and the opportunity that this digital transformation gave you to kind of challenge and change some of those?
Yeah, one of the biggest changes that we had to negotiate with our schools was one of the ways that they had really set up and thought about faculty appointments over time was that we had a previous model of one faculty member had one appointment that encompassed everything that they did at the institution. So if they were a tenured faculty member who was a department chair and also had a role on a critical committee, like, you know, maybe a co-chair of the faculty senate or something like that, that was all wrapped up in one appointment. And what that meant was when you looked at the person in, you know, the HR system or in some of our other systems, they showed up once and they had one title that was like 4 lines long that encompassed everything that they did. So as I spoke about previously, when we went to this model of having standardized faculty ranks, essentially, faculty job codes, we had to break out all of those administrative appointments. The other piece of it was we talked to some of our colleagues. We were going through this process at the same time that we were implementing Workday for our HR system. And one of the best pieces of advice that we had gotten, I believe it came from our colleagues at NYU, was one appointment for one position. And so what that means is in all of our systems now, in Workday and in the FIS, all of those different things that the person does show up separately. So in Workday, they have a primary appointment. As you know, I'll take my boss, who's the vice provost for faculty affairs. He has a position. His primary appointment is he is a professor of physics. Okay, that's his full-time, regular, paid appointment. Then on top of that, he's got a no-pay appointment that is set up for his vice provost, that holds his vice provost title. He has another appointment if he's got another role. So each of those different roles is a separate appointment. It's a separate position in Workday. And if you want to talk about how the money works, I'll get into that at a different time. Come see me. I'll explain it to you. It's complicated. So really the one position, one appointment was huge for us. It was a big change for our schools. It was, but it's really, from a data perspective, it's what works and it's what we needed. So that was a big change for our folks, but they immediately could see the implications of it. So for example, when we do iPads reporting, it used to be if we had a department chair or somebody who had been department chair in the past, it was hard to figure out, why is this person making more money than everybody else in their department at the same level, that kind of thing. And the reason was either they've still got department chair money in there, or they did and now they've gone back, and all of those kinds of things. Now that's all separable. Now we can figure out why those differences exist. And if there's a reason to, make a change, or put it into their contract letter, we've got all of that there because we've got the data to build from.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maggie. Molly or Mandy, any to add on that, on kind of the pre-work ahead of time, or otherwise we'll move into some of that institutional leadership, like change management buy-in. So like you hinted on, the associate dean strategy that we use for faculty activity reporting was very successful with Southern Methodist. So can you tell us a little bit more about, how we were able to kind of gain and maintain that leadership buy-in from the start and how that spread to faculty?
Yeah, absolutely. So what Corey is referencing in particular is our recent FAR adoption, which I think we said, but we did our implementation last year. So this was our very first year of running this. So as I'm speaking to it, it's still new in the process, but I can also speak freshly to how well our setup and our buy-in from that leadership space worked. So as I mentioned and Corey reiterated, we worked with a committee of associate deans from each school throughout the FAR implementation, again, from meeting 1 and forward, to get their buy-in and design it. So as you can imagine, in our previous system, what each school wanted to track and understand for their faculty was very, very different. So what we worked towards was a one unified report that we were going to do for our faculty with how it works. And we were able to get there because we had that buy-in from the beginning. And we were able to use Interfolio to help track that information and how that worked. So how that benefited us was in terms of messaging that we could also promote to our faculty, which was pretty simple, that this is going to be, from what we'd had before, an easier to use system that's ultimately going to make your life easier. And we could speak that to our faculty, but we could also speak it to our leadership from the reporting side. We engaged, as he mentioned, we took from engaging with our leadership, we engaged with our faculty early on. I believe I mentioned it, but we held a summer focus group right after implementation before we launched the system with 15, I think it ended up being 18 faculty from across ranks and schools. And we sat with them for 3 hours in one of our classrooms, and we walked them through the system, and we had them do the work we were going to ask them to do, We learned really quickly from that where pain points potentially could be for our faculty, as well as what was working. They helped us develop a checklist that we ultimately pushed out to all faculty, that then we could also give to our leadership while we were launching, to help reinforce what they could do to support their faculty through the process. And then in the fall, as we were implementing, we had a roadshow. So I think one of our colleagues, again, it might have been Palo Alto yesterday, was saying, any department that would let me come to them and talk to them about it, I went. I went to any department meeting I could and explained the system, the transition, the value of it to department chairs, as well as the functionality benefits of it for our faculty. One more leadership thing that we didn't know we were going to have is we had a provost change. I don't know. I feel like most institutions are experiencing some sort of over leadership. So we had our previous provost had blessed this system. And then over the summer, we had a new provost come in. So what we did is we took a pause. We knew we were still going to launch the system, but we took a pause to get buy-in from her. So we had finished designing the system. With a frog in our throat, our associate provost went in and said, this is what we've designed with how we want to be helping organize our faculty activities. Can you bless it? She had, fortunately for us, only small changes with what she would want to see differently, but we were able to move forward. But we took that step to make sure we got that buy-in, because that was important to have that support at that level as well, to keep moving it forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and kind of a great segue to an extended, topic on that. So, as we know, faculty are giving us feedback often, loudly, softly, everywhere in between. But what is kind of, some of that with those roadshows we did for the associate deans, kind of back to you, Molly and Mandy, what is some of the feedback that we heard most often, and what were some of the specifics that influenced some of those decisions to make sure that, the way that you designed your faculty activity reporting specifically, it had the centralization, but still was able to meet the diverse needs and then get the buy-in. So what was some of the feedback that they gave you to get us to that point?
Well, I mean, the first feedback we always got was, another system? My goodness, do I really have to do this? But that was where our messaging came in, where having done that focus group that we did over the summer, we were able to really readily say, this really took most of our faculty about an hour, what we were asking. Some of them 3 hours if they had additional work that they had to put in there, but we could really fall back on that clear messaging that we've worked with faculty on this. This will be easy. This too shall pass in terms of an initial overhaul with it. And then we focused on wanting this to be a tool for our faculty, not something for them to feel like it was a compliance reporting. We wanted it to feel as beneficial to them in the same way. Do you have any? Okay.
Yeah, but then kind of with that, thank you, Molly, with that, Mandy, with some of the different roles that you've had at the institution, I think you have brought a lot of value to your whole product suite, kind of with your experiences on both sides of the ball. So can you tell us a little bit more about, some of the feedback that we heard, not only from faculty, but also your experience on kind of both sides of the table?
Sure. I've only been in the Office of Faculty Success for almost a year now, and for 8 years prior to that, I served as an administrative specialist in an academic department. And so everything that we're talking about with the implementation of all of our Interfolio products, I can speak to from the end user, and I'm now seeing it from the beginning user, so to speak. So one of the big areas that I think some of you, when you raise your hands, deal with are the things that I deal with with faculty, but I also deal a lot with and kind of changed our role a little bit when I got into this role in faculty success, because the piece that was missing was the training of the administrative support staff. So that piece, as you can hear, you heard about all of our decentralization and all of our different products and programs and everything that we were doing. We were not getting any training. Not only were the schools decentralized, but within each school, the departments were all doing it differently. So as an admin supporting faculty through whether it was search or RPT, because we didn't have FAR at the time. And just as a side note, I'm really glad that I wasn't an admin in the department when we ran through this FAR process. But so I think overall, what I see as the biggest win, besides all the faculty stuff that everybody's, concerned about, was the support that the administrators, the support professionals, the support staff got because of these programs. They went from spending a lot of time making 2,000-page PDFs with bookmarks to being able to go in very easily into RPT and add those things. It also took some of the burden off of the admins, because the faculty then in RPT were required to go directly in and put the candidate information in, because before it was all sent to the admin had to do it. Same thing with faculty search. It makes it so much easier, because prior to having faculty search, our admins were getting hundreds of applications via email, sending emails back and forth to the candidates, and it was all just very cumbersome. And so I think the biggest win that I would see and say is the administrative support staff, the admins, the ones doing a lot of the work, even at the executive dean, the executive assistant to the deans. That too, it has just eliminated a lot of the extra work, a lot of the paper, and I think that it has just been a huge win for us.
Absolutely. And Maggie, I want to give you an opportunity before we kind of move on to some of the impact and outcomes of these transformations. But can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the faculty buy-in and some of that change management, communication and feedback along the way?
Yeah, that's one of our executive sponsors is our Vice Provost for Faculty Affairs, he's half-time in that role, and he's half-time, as I said, a professor of physics. He is also a past chair of our Faculty Senate. He came into these projects as one of our biggest critics, I'll be honest. When they announced that this was going to be our new boss, my stomach was not very happy that day. It was like, okay, here we go, let's rock and roll. And so winning him over to the process meant that we really had to work hard to help him see the wins, help him see, what the benefits were going to be. And if we could convince him, then we had a solid champion. And then he's the one who goes out and he works with, we just also finished our first round of annual activity reporting for 3 of the schools through FAR, through Interfolio. And he actually had us send to him, we have one central mailbox for all of the support issues that come in for the system. We were told to forward to him any of the ones that were faculty members who were just complaining, who were just out and out, disgruntled, not happy, don't like this, not one bit, not one how, not no way. And those went to Kevin. And he was the one who sat down with those faculty members one-on-one and said, I'm going to show you my annual activity report. You show me what you're working on and where the problems are, and I will sit down with you and I will help you figure out how to do it. And so having a champion at that level was a game changer for us.
I was going to say, did they have much to say after that conversation?
We've made some new friends.
Okay. Excellent. And then Mandy started to hit on it a little bit, but also Maggie, over to you a little bit. What do you feel in terms of the impact of this transformation with Interfolio that's kind of had the biggest positive change, not only before, during, but also, you know, in that post-implementation life? Because we know it's always ongoing. So what's been the biggest impact?
Yeah, I think really so our FIS project has become the poster child for One University for us. And that's really just implementing those good data governance practices. One of the biggest ones was we used to have all of these different administrative departments and the schools and even down to the academic department levels, they would all say they owned their data. Right? If they had data on something, if they had a spreadsheet that they were maintaining, they owned it, they kept it, they maintained it, and they got to say who got to see it and who got to use it and how they got to use it. And that's not productive for an institution, right? So we are reporting out as a single university. So therefore, one of the big changes in data governance was the university owns the data. And with a faculty information system that's centralized, we have one authoritative source for data. It's a lot easier to say the university owns the data. And if there's a business need for someone to see that information, they should be able to see it. So we built an access process. If you want access to this data, you tell us the business reason that you need access for the data, you get access to that data. You don't get access to things that you don't have a business need to see, but otherwise, right? If they need to see it, there's a good business reason, we support that and we pass on the information. So that's been a huge change for us, and I think it's definitely the biggest win.
Yeah, absolutely. And Molly, I kind of want you just to kind of touch, because I know we have folks in the room that are in all phases of the process. So especially with that first cycle that you all completed for specifically faculty activity reporting and some of the connections with RPT to see that impact, what is kind of like, you know, the biggest positive change that you would take away kind of from that first cycle?
So with our FAR wrapping up its first year, one thing that I'm really happy we had with what we did with our leadership buy-in and our roadshows and all those spaces is that we can successfully say that we had 80% of our faculty, so we have 800 faculty, work with our system within FAR. Now that had varying degrees. I want to put a caveat on that. That had varying degrees of completion, but we did do a whole university rollout. So with how we approached our buy-in, how we approached our roadshows, we're really happy with that. That was a figure that we were really happy to be able to report out to our leadership and to our schools. So that was one of our biggest takeaways. Now what we're also learning, so we're pleased with that, but what we're also learning is that the work doesn't stop. So we have done a really good job of trying to buy in those other 20%, as well as keep those that we've gotten bought in, to recognize we know this system has hiccups in it. We know that you've had challenges. You know there's things that could be clearer. And what we've done is continue iterative communication throughout. So we've owned the things that didn't work, and we've announced we're working on them. And we praise the things that did work, and that has helped us move forward, and we're confident we're going to continue to grow that number as we move into year 2 of the cycle.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And then, you know, we've sat through so many great sessions over the course of the last couple of days, and still have some more great sessions this afternoon, but so it's hard to remember all this great information. So kind of, you know, I want to as we head into this last question before we open up some Q&A and discussion where you can ask anything of the panelists, what's kind of like your mic drop moment in terms of if attendees remember just one thing, what do you want them to walk away with from your transformation experience?
I would say definitely the mic drop for us is don't reinvent the wheel. There are people in your organization who know how to do these things. Figure out who they are. One of our fabulous teammates is someone who's a data architect on the data governance team. Her job is to ask the question, what do you mean by that? Every time a field comes up. Every time we want to add a new field to Interfolio, we have Cynthia come in and she sits there and she says, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that field? How is it populated? And she writes down every single aspect of that, and it goes into our data cookbook. Because we have a data cookbook, because you can look up these things, because this is what our data governance team does. So don't think it's a one and done. Don't reinvent the wheel. Go and find the people who know how to do this, and they will continue to help you over time. Because that's one of the reasons, I don't know about you, but this is one of the reasons why I work at a university, right? Because we support each other. We're all in this together, and we can find a lot of help from our friends.
Great segue into what I was going to say. For me, again, I've already mentioned that I have a unique perspective, but my takeaway from all of this is that the faculty are not the only stakeholders. There is a reason that we're doing what we're doing in these processes, that it involves everybody from the provost all the way down to the administrative assistants who are helping the faculty to put this information in. It's everything's in one space, and it's just beneficial to everybody at every level.
I love that. My biggest thing would be intentional from the start, and then know the work doesn't stop at implementation. We saw firsthand with our differences in how we brought on search and RPT. Again, those came on a bit of a staggered space, and so we're trying to make those more centralized by bringing them on decentralized. But what we've learned by being more intentional with our FAR implementation is that we're not having those struggles of bringing everyone together. We're starting as, I'm going to borrow from Syracuse, we're starting as one university. We don't get to have the umbrella, but we're starting as one university, and that's helping, we're seeing the success from that right away. So biggest thing to remember is we're not just implementing a tool, we're building an approach to support our faculty over time. So being intentional from the start really allows you to set up for success to achieve that.
Yeah, great perspective. And intentionality is key in understanding the why. So we want to go ahead and open it up to some questions if you all have anything that you're curious or kind of thinking about. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that we thank our panelists, Maggie, Molly, and Mandy, for their time today. So